Cigar, and he wins with a vengeance today. The Unconquerable, Invincible, Unbeatable Cigar!
I don't know if he's the greatest horse that ever lived, but his accomplishment was one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of racing. And the thing that separated him from other very good or great horses of his era was clearly the streak. You had other horses be two-time horse of the year, you had other horses win the Breeders' Cup Classic, etc. But to go on this winning streak, which at this day and age is impossible, because not only did he win 16 in a row, we'll never see a horse in the modern era, a good horse even run 16 times. So that separated him from all the great horses of his era, from Citation in the 40s to him in the mid-90s. You think of the great horses that ran during that time, Secretariat, Seattle Slew, Forgo, Kelso, etc. None of them were able to do what he was able to do. And I think that's what makes him stand alone.
We acquired Cigar from a California trainer in the spring of 1994. And as we prepared him, we got him ready to run. Looking at his past performances, we could see where he had been running on the turf and been running fairly well out in California. So we sort of geared him to a turf campaign and we trained him in that direction. I ran him 4 times on the grass, unsuccessfully, I might say, and actually some very average races.
It is unaccounted for, holding off Same Old Wish. Unaccounted for, wins by 2. Same Old Wish was second by 5, Cigar was third.
I was the last one to lose on him before he went on his win streak. I rode Cigar on the turf for Mott. Was just a regular allowance horse on the turf that I rode, because I rode everything, almost everything for him. Mike Smith and I were sharing, and almost felt like a horse like holding back almost, or something, like not trying. And and I tipped him out and he was finished up, go off the turf course, and he like runs off with me back home and just feels absolutely spectacular on the dirt. I'm thinking to myself, well, I bet you this horse he should give him a chance to run on the dirt. And I kind of told Bill, it feels like he would run on the dirt.
She was a salesman as well as a very, very good jockey, great jockey. And if she would have really believed that, I think she would have talked Bill Mott into riding her on that horse the next time on the dirt. And Mike Smith rode him the next time. So maybe it's true, but I think she probably would have made a point to ride him.
And at that time, my agent was Larry Snake Cooper, who was he was an amazing agent. We had so much fun together. So he tells Bill Mott the next time he races that we might have another horse in there. And Bill was like, oh, ride the other horse. It's not that big of a deal anyway, kind of a thing. And so Snake was like, no, I don't want to ride the other horse. I want to ride your horse, because it was riding for Bill Mott at the time. So Larry Snake Cooper was obligated kind of to the other horse. So he told Bill Mott, I can't ride your horse. And Bill Mott goes, he was kind of in the flavor of, oh, that's okay, you can ride the other horse kind of a thing.
I didn't ride a lot for Bill Mott at that time. I really didn't. I had gone to him at Saratoga and asked him why he didn't ride me on more horses, because we had a history. I'd ridden for him back in Chicago in the mid-'70s. So there was a little bit of history with Mott and I, but he was pretty much riding Mike Smith and Julie Krone on a lot of his horses. The only reason I got on him was because Mike Smith chose to ride Devil Is Due. I mean, there was a whole conversation between Krone and Mike Smith and myself for about a month there, maybe 2 months, about this horse Cigar and how he was underachieving. And Mike Smith came to me and he said, that horse Cigar, he's in on the dirt. And it was the next day, I think. And he said, I'm going to be interested to see how he runs. And I finished early and I had to go over to the Meadowlands to ride. And so consequently, I wasn't there to watch his Allowance win that day when Mike won on him. And I got to the jocks room in Aqueduct the next day, and Mike said, hey, did you see that horse win? And I said, what horse? And he said, Cigar. And I said, no, I rode at the Meadowlands last night. I hadn't watched the reruns. He said, oh my God, he ran off the screen. He won by so far. I said, really? And he said, yeah. Well, happenstance that the next race was the Naira Mile, and Mike was committed to Devil Is Due, and it kind of stuck in my mind what he said. So I told my agent, I said, listen, if there's any chance you can get on this horse, I think Mike has a conflict trying to get on Cigar for the Naira Mile. And, that was that.
I think the next race, why I didn't ride him, was I went out of town for Bill. We won a stake race out of town. And then Jerry Bailey rode him that day because he's like, oh, I gotta throw Jerry Bailey, I gotta let him ride a horse. And so that was the start.
I was in Japan on the day that he ran in the Naira Mile. I actually had a horse called Paradise Creek in the Japan Cup on that particular day. And so I had to call to America to find out how he ran, and I heard that he had run extremely well.
He was in complete command from the go. He wasn't on the lead immediately, but he broke and he took me in the race, and immediately I thought about what Mike had said, and he felt like a winner at every pole. And of course he won easily. And so it wasn't a huge surprise, after what Mike had told me.
And Cigar running a monstrous race today to win the Naira Mile. And he did it decisively.
Well, I worked for the New York Daily News as the horse racing writer back when Cigar was running. And essentially I covered, I think, every single race during his winning streak. But, once it got up to about 5 or 6, at that point we knew how special this horse was. And that's back in an era when newspapers mattered and when newspapers covered horse racing. So be it Dubai, be it California, be it Florida, I was there front and center to watch, as I believe, maybe all 16 races in his streak, at least 15 or 14 of them. And, for a horse racing rider, it was quite a thrill, obviously.
And at the 8th pole, it's Cigar and Primitive Paul. Those two are coming down to the line together with bonus money in third. Cigar's going to win this race. And Cigar just crushed this field today. Jerry Bailey never asked him to run.
Cigar leads it. Silver Goblin can't keep up. The Oaklawn Handicap and #1 rating will go to Cigar by 2.5.
And down the stretch they come. Cigar with Jerry Bailey going easily on the front end. He's in front by 3.5. Devil is do not gaining. Cigar smoking through the stretch.
He races in Florida, he races in California, he races in New York, he races in Massachusetts. That's one of the things that made him such a fan favorite. At tracks like Suffolk Downs, where he raced in 2 mass caps, this was like getting, a rock star. It's like they had the Beatles play at Suffolk Downs in the 60s, literally. This is probably the second most exciting thing that ever happened to Suffolk Downs, getting a Cigar to race there not once, but twice.
We went to Massachusetts the first time, #1, because the timing of the race and it fit into his schedule. And I remember going, and I remember being there in the excitement and the enthusiasm that the local fans there had for such a good horse to come back to Suffolk. I think in the past, past history, I think, many good horses had probably raced at Suffolk, but it had probably been a long time since they'd had a horse, the quality of Cigar that came up there.
I loved Massachusetts. I loved Suffolk. The people were so nice. He was a very charismatic horse. The people were lined up along the front apron, and I signed autographs for I don't know how long before the race. But what particularly struck me, and I remember it, is warming up before the race, how many of the backstretch workers came to the outside rail to watch this horse run. There had to be at least 100 people lined up, as we warmed up before the race. And these were workers from the backside. These weren't fans. These weren't patrons. So that was pretty cool to me, that he had the respect of the people that worked in the game.
But not only when I was there did they, show the appreciation and the enthusiasm for it, years afterwards. I mean, I would have people from Boston or from the local fans, the local fan base up there, that would come up to me and they would say, thank you so much for bringing him to Boston. He said it was really, they remembered him being there and the enthusiasm, that he brought with him. And, I was very appreciative, and it warmed my heart actually to have somebody show that much enthusiasm and appreciation.
And here he comes, a super payday for a future champion. Cigar turns the mass cap into a Boston massacre. Cigar over poor but honest and double Calvados.
A lot of horses win a lot of races at their home track. We'll see horses be very good in New York, but they won't leave New York. We'll see horses be very good in California that won't leave California. This horse was a New York-based horse, but he literally went all over the world to do what he did.
we made our schedule, and you know, when Cigar got really good, we were able to announce our schedule. We didn't have to shop for the races and see where he fit and how difficult the race was going to come up. I mean, we ran in the type of race that we knew he wanted to run in, and the best races that were available at the time, and we let everybody else worry about, you know, where they were going to run. So you can do that when you've got the very best.
All class, and Cigar wins the Hollywood Gold Cup.
Cigar, no competition today. He toyed with them this afternoon, and he glides gracefully under the line with plenty left.
The first time we ran him in the Jockey Gold Cup, we'd come from California. We'd run in the Hollywood Gold Cup. He won that very easily. And then he had some time off, and we ran at Woodward Jockey Gold Cup. He was brilliant at Hollywood. He was brilliant in the Woodward.
I had never won the Gold Cup, so it was kind of special to me. He was, again, he broke from kind of the outside-ish, 6'5", 6'7", something like outside the other two speed horses. Thunder Gulch was in there, and he was very accomplished, of course. I had ridden him as a 2-year-old, so I kind of knew him. He beat me in the Florida Derby. He won the Kentucky Derby and Preakness, so I knew Thunder Gulch very, very well. And he was a very good horse, exceptional horse. But I just didn't think he was in the same category as Cigar. I really didn't. I had become to think that Cigar was pretty much unbeatable. He was brilliantly fast. He was basically a miler that Bill Mott was able to stretch out to a mile and a quarter. So he's a horse that wanted to be on the lead every moment, if you allowed him to be.
Cigar past the 16th pole, a length and a half lead, unaccounted for, second best to the sensational Cigar, one of the great ones indeed.
So then, of course, after that led up to the Breeders' Cup, which was like a month later, and that was his first Breeders' Cup that we ran him in, and of course he was just brilliant on Breeders' Cup day.
And here he is, the unconquerable, invincible, unbeatable Cigar!
I was fortunate enough to get to cover him in the Dubai World Cup, which was the first ever Dubai World Cup, of course. And to me, this was almost like an Olympic-like event because you had horses from all over the world running against Cigar. You had horses, of course, from the Middle East, from Dubai. You had horses from Europe. And, you know, he represented in that race America. And, you know, I didn't really expect that when I went over there, but you really got caught up in sort of the pro-American fervor. Just like, you know, we wanted the dream team to win in the Olympics or the hockey team back in Lake Placid to win.
He traveled a lot. We took him everywhere. And Mr. Paulson was a very game sportsman. I mean, he wanted to go to the biggest races. He wanted to show his horse to everybody. He wanted to meet the biggest challenges there were, and that's what we did. That's one reason that, you know, we went to Dubai with him, and, you know, that was the inaugural Dubai World Cup, and, you know, we were going into territory that we knew nothing about. I mean, I had no idea. I'd never been there. I had no idea what the facilities were going to be like, what kind of racetrack we were going to have. I mean, they told me about it, but I'd never experienced it myself.
This was an event where he was carrying the pride of the United States and the United States racing. It's the first ever event. It's a world global event for horse racing. And as I said earlier, it gets horses from all over the world. And yeah, I'm not sure that anybody doubted him over there or thought that he wasn't as good as we thought he was. But nonetheless, it was certainly nice to see him show it on the racetrack and prove it.
And Cigar is digging deep. He's never had to fight harder. He's coming back. It's going to be Cigar. It's going to take it. Under the line, Cigar by 3 parts on it. 14 out of 14 for Cigar.
It is Cigar, the peerless Cigar, putting on a spectacular show. 15 for 15. Citation's record is next. Cigar wins the NASCAR.
Cigar is an unstoppable dynamo. The crowd rises to a champion. 16 in succession as Cigar assumes the crown of immortality. Second, Dramatic Gold. Eldest third from Honor and Glory. Lieutenant
Mr. Paulson wanted to, you know, he wanted to go to California with him. He had just been to Arlington Park with him and won the Citation Challenge with him. And he wanted to go to California and run in the Pacific Classic. So we took him out there, and obviously he was going to be a big favorite.
So I was also there for the end of the streak in 1996 at Del Mar. And it was a very sobering event. I don't think anybody there was really very happy, obviously, even though he was beaten and was beaten fair and square on the racetrack. It was not so much who won the race, it was that he didn't win. But I guess all things, of course, must come to an end. And you look back on it, how difficult it is to win 16 in a row at the highest level of horse racing, one grade one after another, one grade one after another. In the end, this finally just caught up to him. It was just too big a task.
It was tough. I had become to think he was totally bulletproof, and there was nothing I could ask of Cigar that he couldn't do. I just simply asked him to go too fast too soon, to keep another horse from boxing him in down the backside, because I thought if I always just gave Cigar a chance to win, put him out in the clear and didn't get him in trouble, that he would win. And of course, there was a price to pay to do that day, and it was too much.
After he lost on Cigar, he was looking for me. He's like, "Where's Julie? Where's Julie?" And he walked up to me and he goes, "You can no longer say you were the last one to lose on Cigar."
And he had gotten beaten in Del Mar. And I didn't know if he would be the same again. And he came back into Woodward and he was the same Cigar. He was so powerful that day. And I thought, okay, he's going to win the Gold Cup again, and then he's going to win the Breeders' Cup again.
Coming down to the final furlong, to the cheers of a crowd, here is Cigar, and he wins with a vengeance today. Cigar wins by 4.
That was it. He ran into Skip Away in the Gold Cup, and as good as he ran, Skip Away was younger and better and stronger that day. And then in the Breeders' Cup in Canada, he had a wide trip. I couldn't save any ground with him. He just wasn't that dominating horse that he was the year before that could take the worst of it and still win. The insurance company had purchased him because they had paid out on the fertility policy, and they had tried all these drugs to make sure he was tried to regain some fertility. It didn't work. And so then he was moved over to the Kentucky Horse Park, which he was just a horse again, and people were around him, and he was kind of a people's horse. I mean, I think he liked it there. I think that's where he was supposed to be. And because he became more people-friendly and people-oriented once he was there.
We had a lot of people come by here to see him, people that had followed his races all the way to Dubai. We had people fly in from Australia to see him, just specifically him. And, people would cheer. The pavilion would be absolutely full of people eager to see him. In fact, there was a couple of times people get very emotional, break down into tears of joy.
He was a peppermint horse, like a lot of horses are. As soon as you'd rattle the paper, he'd come running. And so I would always take peppermints. And he was kind of like a wild beast, though. Once, the breeding started, even though he was sterile, once that started, he lost a little bit of that lovey-dovey stuff. And it took about 7 or 8 years for me to find that back in him again. In fact, it was totally against the rules, but Tammy, the girl that took care of him, would give me a leg up and take a picture several of the times that I went. So I got to ride Cigar a few more times, even after he retired.
Behind us, the field that is now Funny Sides was Cigar's back in the day. Funny Side had the next paddock back. And so after the shows are over, we latch those back doors open and they can come and go as they please. And there were several times that I saw Funny Side and Cigar just peering at each other out the back doors, giving each other the eye, and, just everything would be still for about a moment. And then off they go down the fence line, neck and neck, flat out. No jockeys, no saddles, no bridles, just 2 horses wanting to see which one was still the best. And there was quite a number of times that Cigar would end up on top.
Somebody asked me one time, was he the best horse that you ever rode? And I still feel like this. I think he's the best horse almost anybody could have ever ridden. So I'm going to crack up through this, I think. So my mindset when I rode until Cigar was horses were a means to an end. I loved horses. I grew up with them. And I respected them, but I had no attachment to them emotionally. They were a means to an end. It was almost like a doctor-patient relationship. I didn't want to get attached to any horse because invariably I would change to another horse the next race, or I would be taken off, or the relationship wouldn't continue. So that's the way I approached him until Cigar. And he was just such a cool horse. Not only was he really good, but he was like a pet almost. So I just thought that was a special characteristic that I had never seen in a horse, to be that good and to be that docile and cool, you know, when the cameras were off, when the gate was off, when there wasn't any racing going on. So he made me fall in love with horses.